Hi, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's Friday, and it's 10 o'clock. Well, it's a little after, but
Friday time.
Friday time. It's Friday time. Yay! TGIF. And it's Talk to a Farmer Friday, Talk to a Rancher Friday, and or Talk to Ag Stakeholders Fridays. So, Paul, I have had the most amazing series with your entire team. And I just want to thank you for that before I even introduce you.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for that. I mean, it's some, I didn't realize till I came here all the things that we did. And so, and we have an amazing team and they do amazing things. So thank you for
certainly
giving them a platform to share that.
Well, I listened and learned. That's what I called the series. And it was awesome for us to be able to do that. But this is actually the wrap up of the Arizona Department of Agriculture's series, this Listen and Learn series. So I got to interview all the division heads and personally learn myself. But I thought kind of our end game, or capping it all off to speak, that we would ask Paul Brierley, the director of the Arizona Department of Ag, to finish it all up for us. And I have to give him props for inspiring this series, because you had said, Julie, you know, it wouldn't hurt to talk about when we get policy right, or we get regulations right, they can actually be a good thing. And then I thought, well, besides, I need to learn more about the Arizona Department of Ag. So you inspired the series, and I really appreciate that.
You bet.
But Paul Brierley prior was with the University of Arizona for the Yuma Center of Ag Excellence. I know I don't have it right. What's the full name?
You were so close. The Yuma Center of Excellence for Desert Agriculture.
Yeah, so that was where you were previously, but even if I go back in history a little bit longer, you and I actually worked together at the Arizona, or I was about to say the Arizona Department of Agriculture, but the Arizona Farm Bureau. So we kind of go way back.
We do go way back. Yeah.
And so because of the whole policy focus, Paul, thanks to you as current director for the Arizona Department of Ag, I kind of want to maybe not hyper focus on that, but focus on it a little bit. When a state agency like the Arizona Department of Ag crafts effective policy based on statutes.
I was going to say, let's talk about what policy means, because we're an executive agency.
Right.
Public policy is set by the legislature. Of course, they have to push something through the legislature and then have the governor sign it, and then it becomes statute. And statute is what dictates what we do. So we don't actually make policy; we implement the policies that come our way. And sometimes they come over the fence and we don't know what they are, and sometimes we've been involved with with making them happen.
Right.
But that purview is definitely the legislature and the governor.
It's really we the people.
Mm-hmm.
In so many ways.
Representative democracy.
Yeah, representative democracy. So what are some of the tangible benefits you've observed for Arizona farmers, ranchers, and even consumers? And then could you highlight even a specific, maybe we the people crafted the right policy and put it into statutes, and then as an organization, you guys had to make rules so there'd be regulations to it?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, frankly, everything we do is that process, right? There's probably been some concern or some, somebody somewhere thought there ought to be a law, right? Because truly that's the basis of everything we do. And it's actually been interesting since I came in. People do have perceptions of, oh, you're the Department of Ag, you must do a lot for water conservation or regenerative agriculture or whatever it is. And in fact, it was kind of an interesting story for cabinet meetings. So the cabinet meetings are a chance for all the state agencies to get together, and state agency directors, and work on what are the governor's goals, how do we impact those, and things like that. And I was asked in the early phases, it was kind of the departments, each department would come in and do a presentation. I was asked if I would come speak about what the Department of Ag did to promote and enhance water conscious agriculture. Mm-hmm. I politely
remembered when
I politely declined, because we don't. There's no statute that says we have any authority over anything to do with water, and so I declined. But then they declined to let me decline. But it was really insightful. Ben Henderson was the operations director for the governor, and he said, first of all, it's really good for us to know what you do and don't do.
Good point.
Second of all, what if in the future you wanted for the Department of Agriculture to play a role in Arizona being the lead, the shining example of how do we promote water conscious ag? What would that take? What would that take as far as legislation or executive orders or resources? And I really appreciated that feedback.
That's awesome.
Because that's, we've talked about the different purviews of policy, but that seems to be one that everybody agrees on. Mm-hmm. We need water conscious ag. We need ag to stay profitable and productive, even with less water. And so that just to kind of clarify how those things work.
That makes a distinction.
So it's really hard to think about like what's one particular thing that's a policy, because everything we do comes out of those policy decisions, and they've said you should, and largely we regulate and inspect, right? And you mm-hmm. probably got that from most of the directors that you talk to,
right? Yeah.
We license, we inspect, those kind of things. So a few things I thought of are how do we do that? Risk-based inspections is one of the things that is a buzzword right now, but it mm-hmm. makes sense, right? We don't have the kind of resources that we've had in the past as far as boots on the ground. So when that's the case, you do risk-based inspections. There's no reason to be inspecting an area. I mean, I'll just take fuel pumps as an example. If fuel pumps are always accurate, then should we be spending so much time looking at fuel pumps when scales are where the problem is?
Okay.
So yeah. we do our best to say where are the actual risks so that we're actually helping to make sure that compliance is out there. Compliance is always the goal.
Okay. So risk-based, I mean, it kind of explains itself in some ways, but you're going to only target those things where the risk is higher, right?
The risk, well, that's part of it, or just the risk of non-compliance, I guess I would say. So if you find that in that example, if half of the scales that we test are inaccurate, and so you're not getting what you pay for, but 99% of the fuel pump, and these are just numbers I'm pulling out of the air, right. But 99% of the fuel pumps are accurate, then I don't really want our people spending all their day testing fuel pumps and not being able to test scales. So,
makes sense. And it allows you to achieve what you have to achieve, even if your employee numbers aren't what you'd like them to be.
Yes,
okay.
That's right. So there's several examples we can talk about as we go through self-inspection and different things. One policy issue that was a hot button with Farm Bureau for sure was the cage-free egg production.
Right.
And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do because that was not in statute. It was done by rule. As emergencies have come up of bird flu infecting egg production facilities and very limited egg supplies, as you've seen in the stores, we were able to delay the implementation of that so that more eggs could be sourced and fill the shelves. Maybe fill the shelves is a little optimistic, but keep them more full than they would have been otherwise.
And it's been delayed by 7 years.
Well, we're working on that. I've delayed it twice by a year at a time to 2027, and the governor now has directed that we should try to implement rules to delay it for another 7 years. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. There's lots of things. When H5N1, the bird flu, started infecting dairy cattle in Texas, we implemented 3 different movement restrictions, trying to keep infected cattle from coming into Arizona. And that's this fine line we walk with policies that we implement. Mm-hmm. Is you want commerce to be as free as possible,
right? To
be as productive as possible, but yet if we don't do some regulation and limitations on something like that, where we tightened up the time frames and whatnot for inspection of cattle before they come to Arizona, then you're just leaving the industry open to devastation.
Right.
I don't know exactly what you had in mind when you said policies, but those come to mind. Worker safety. The governor's made a big push on heat, safety around heat that people are experiencing, and of course we have pesticides and things that a lot of what we do is trying to make sure it's a safe workplace for people out there.
As it should be. not to generate any controversy, and this was pre you coming on as director, just for the record, one of the reasons the Arizona Farm Bureau opposed the egg rule is because it wasn't based on statute. It was part of it. And, it goes back to the earlier thing. Policy really is driven by statute stuff. And again, that was pre you, for the record.
Yeah. I guess I would say, just to wrap that up,
yeah,
the ideal thing is where you have compliance without having to have strict enforcement, right?
Right.
The strict enforcement is there when it's needed, but that's not our go-to. Mm-hmm. And so whatever the policy is, it's what tools do we have? And we have our non-regulatory division, which we'll talk about too. And that's the ideal is, again, compliance being the goal. Can you do it through assistance rather than through enforcement?
And I like that philosophy because you're not trying to have, when I say you, just in general, you're not trying to have, you did something wrong, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and we're going to come find you. Yeah.
And like your food systems division or area, that has nothing to do with regulatory, correct?
The food system support division, that's right, it's non-regulatory. So yeah, we can get into that. We have three regulatory and one non-regulatory. And there's no question that we regulate some very important things, and we're very strict about those.
And they have to be regulated.
We don't want to be a gotcha.
Yeah.
We want everybody to know what are the rules you're playing by. We're out there to make sure that you do, but we're out there to help you be able to do that too.
And our series, for those that are watching this live and will watch it later, will help you understand that if you go back to our entire series, which started about 6-7 weeks ago. So keep those in mind. You can find those on the website, Arizona Farm Bureau or azfb.org, in our videos section. We also have them on YouTube, or you can just pop into your Instagram channel and look up Arizona Farm Bureau and you'll find them. So just doing a little promotion there.
And I got to say, you guys have done a great job, because I'm not a heavy Instagram user, and that's putting it mildly. But somehow I always get a notification that there's a new video on there for Farm Bureau.
Well, and what's been so fun, because I haven't imagined that this would be one of our most exciting series. The next series we're going to start is on wine. Yeah. Well, it's a little bit more exciting, but none of the department heads have had less than 900 views each.
Wow.
And about 2 or 3 of them, they went beyond the 1,000 views. I have a lot of people that come up to me when I interact, because I do have a lot of followers, or not but the Arizona Farm Bureau has a lot of followers from our farmers and ranchers, and they say, Julie, I watch the series. I do it on the weekends. I don't get to watch the live. Like this, we may only have a handful of people that come on the live, or a couple dozen. But that's what's been neat about it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We always say we have to tell agriculture stories so people understand. And
exactly.
That's been one of my bigger roles when you talk about policy. Is I'm at these cabinet meetings, and people don't often think about agriculture and all the ways that we impact the issues of today. And so I'm always piping up about here's what agriculture does or could do, or how it impacts agriculture.
Absolutely. And I was personally kind of embarrassed that, as much as I've known the Arizona Department of Ag, at least some of the people that work here, and I couldn't really explain it. Now I feel like I can do a better job of that.
Good.
You've mentioned the importance of a safe and reliable food supply. Can you walk us through a case where a well-designed Arizona Department of Agriculture rule or policy directly improved food safety to support our rural economies?
I can.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. So you mentioned I was at Waycita. That was in Yuma. So I was in Yuma during the 2018 E. coli outbreak on romaine lettuce. It was devastating. And as many people know, the responding agency was the FDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. They came several months afterwards, when it was completely different cropping and even different farmers at that point, because it changed from the vegetable season to the summer season. They came with very little knowledge of really how the production was done and how food safety, frankly, was done, because there's so much effort on food safety. And they came with a mentality that we're going to find the bad guy and punish them. That didn't go well. And that's not good for anybody. That didn't help solve the problem, didn't help prevent it in the future. So fast forward, and the Department of Agriculture, by the way, didn't have the jurisdiction to respond. They didn't have the laboratory certifications and equipment to be able to do the testing. There were a lot of things that we couldn't do, and we weren't, able to do in that outbreak. So fast forward 5 years, and this is credit to my predecessor and what we continue to get to make happen. Back to statute and all that. The legislature gave us jurisdiction to respond. We got funding to build up a new laboratory, and so we have very modern lab equipment and getting all the certifications that we need for testing these kind of things. We got federal funding for training, doing industry training, and we did that in partnership with U of A to do training on best management practices and all of that. So food safety is, so all the best management practices get out there to the industry. And then a little over a year ago, we got funding for a rapid response team, which is that we will have the resources to respond to that kind of outbreak with food safety people and lab specialists and all that. So,
and you'll get out there quick because you're the Arizona Department of Ag. You're not waiting for a federal agency to show up a couple months later.
Yeah, and we know the people. We understand the industry. We're going to be there not looking for who's the bad guy. Now, if there's a bad guy, of course. But I know the industry, and they are doing their level best to prevent that. And if something happens, it's because it's something that nobody really knew about, or it's something that we need to figure out.
Most of the time, they find out it's some kind of outlier thing.
And it's not even just one outlier thing. It's like 2 or 3 things have to happen at the same time.
Yep.
And knock on wood, we haven't had another big outbreak like that. And I'm hoping that we won't because of all these efforts.
And one of your division heads, Teresa Lopez, just has an extensive background in food safety. And
she's been in the middle of all that. She heads up our Leafy Green Marketing Agreement, which is actually industry-led. That's a really neat program because that's industry, the shippers who buy the product, saying, if you want to grow for us, you've got to follow these, training, inspections, audits, but it's voluntary by industry to get ahead of those kind of problems and not need government to swoop in and say, this is what you're going to do. So she's headed that up for years. When it comes to food safety, she's super knowledgeable, and now she's in that position.
And she's so excited. It was so fun. Well, it was fun interviewing all of your division heads, but I could just sense her enthusiasm and commitment to getting this done right. And I can't quit saying enough about, we're all in this together. The stakeholders in the food supply chain, it takes every one of us.
It does. So let me bring in one more. It also takes federal agencies, right? So I've been bagging on the FDA, but so one of my roles in this role, I sit on an association called the National Association of State Departments of Ag, so NASDA. There's an association for everything. I underestimated that organization. I went to the first meeting of theirs, and I thought, I'm going to meet some other state directors, and I'll hear some speakers. It'll be great, I got there, and there was a closed door meeting in a room about this size with the top food safety people from FDA.
Wow.
And it was clear that organization had been beating on them to change their culture and not show up, with that mentality, show up with 20 people in Tyvek suits and just scare everybody to death and be sure that they're going to find some bad actor. This organization had been working for their culture change, and they had been implementing a reorg to put one person at the top of all human food safety, so there was always somebody to answer to a problem. And turned out, we through that organization work really closely with them in a nonpartisan manner because it's all 50 state directors.
And so you're telling me that organization kind of has inspired this federal agency, the FDA, to kind of reorg and be a little bit more compliance oriented instead of gotcha oriented.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, it was kind of culminated recently, and I don't know if culminated is the right term, but the head of food safety came to Yuma, and myself and my counterpart in California, the head of California Department of Food and Ag, hosted him and his staff on a bus tour around Yuma and Imperial Valley.
Excellent.
To see what is this industry, how do they work. One of the issues with food safety is sort of co-location of animal facilities with produce production, and so we stopped at a feedlot that's in the middle of vegetable production, and just all these things to get them that understanding firsthand on the ground. And so
wow.
I couldn't be more pleased with those opportunities for me to sit down with the Secretary of USDA or the head of food safety at FDA. Now, having said that, with the new administration, there's new people in, and there's been a lot of upheaval, and sadly, that person that came in was heading that up has resigned. So it's incumbent on me to continue.
With new people.
Yeah, new people and new relationships. But.
Which is always good and challenging for us because we expand our network anyway. With your extensive background in agriculture and technology, how do you see the Arizona Department of Ag evolving to meet modern challenges like water scarcity or technological advancements in farming?
Again, there's so many ways to answer that question. If I think about internally, we're here. Again, we do both the regulation, but also the support, and statutes dictate both of that.
Right.
We have so many ways we regulate, but we also educate and support and promote commodities and Arizona agriculture. So the industry is always changing, whether it's because of water or because of markets or because of whatever it is. There's different crops that get grown, and some become more popular based on market prices and whatever else. So we have to adjust too as that changes. And that's, I think, of cattle and the flow of cattle that come up here to be fed and then back to Mexico to be processed. And there's all these different flows and diseases and identification tracking, ownership tracking, and to be able to do trace back when there's a problem.
So you have to pivot quickly to whatever's changing. And I think of an example, and I learned this from our lab guy, Mr. Marsh. So we haven't grown hemp in Arizona for decades. And people think, well, what has to be Arizona Department of Ag's role? And I didn't really think of this either, but Mr. Marsh pointed out that, well, they have to stay under a certain level of that. Is it HTC?
THC.
THC. And so they have to randomly test crops to make sure. I don't know. I can't remember if he said that all fields have to be tested.
So hemp was made illegal along with marijuana at one point federally. The Farm Bill, I believe the 2018 Farm Bill, made industrial hemp a legal crop to grow.
Yeah.
But it needed to be regulated, and so
that it stays within that requirement.
It's very close to the marijuana, the cannabis family, and so industrial hemp, the way they define it is that it's 0.3% or less THC. THC is the ingredient that helps you get high.
Yeah.
So that is our role, and I'm glad you brought that up because there is a lot of kind of a hot issue right now that cannabis products are regulated through Department of Health Services, and they're pretty heavily regulated. The industrial hemp, again, it's grown to be used for industrial purposes, not to have the psychoactive property that cannabis has. So that is our role, is strictly to license people to grow it, and then make sure when they harvest it that it's not something that anybody can get high from.
Otherwise, they would have to be relicensed and be regulated under the health department.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the crop actually gets destroyed if it's over, and that's been a tough thing too. But
it sounds like that our industrial hemp growers are doing pretty good in that.
Yeah, there's a lot fewer of them. At first, there was a big hype all across the country. This is the next best thing, and everybody planted it, and everybody wanted seeds. And now I think we're in a period where people are figuring out where are the best places to grow it, what varieties work best there, what's the best markets. But an interesting thing has happened along the way. America being a place of entrepreneurs and people figuring out how to do things to make money, um, some smart people out there have figured out how to take the hemp that's grown with that small amount of THC, the psychoactive element, and take that and concentrate it and make a product that does get you high.
Really?
That's not from cannabis. And so it doesn't have the same kind of regulation.
Oh.
And
we are so smart as entrepreneurs, aren't we?
So, we get brought into those conversations
sure.
about, well, this needs to be regulated. And it's like, well, in fact, I've had visitors here, both from the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. And I'll be asked questions like, well, don't you agree this is an addictive product? And it's like, we're not in the business of deciding who should be allowed to make what or buy what. We strictly deal with industrial hemp, and that when it's harvested, it is at that low level.
The low level.
But, things are, the Attorney General has weighed in that those products are not allowed to be sold here, and legislature's always looking at that. And, basically my answer is, once that policy is decided, like we talked earlier, between the legislature and the governor, then that may dictate that we do something different.
Right.
But at the moment, that's our role in that.
Yeah. So this is a question that kind of relates to organizational function. As a director of the Arizona Department of Ag, how do you prioritize the agency's mission to protect consumer health, advance agriculture, and safeguard commerce, especially when these goals might occasionally conflict? I know I made my questions kind of complicated this time, but I was really being thoughtful. I thought I have the director in the hot seat this time. So
I'm always in the hot seat.
God bless you, right?
I go back to statutes, first of all. Statutes dictate what we need to do. And when they say that we have to respond in 48 hours to a request for livestock inspection, then, we're going to respond in 48 hours. And that may mean that some other duty that we do or function that we serve doesn't get the same priority because we have to meet that 48-hour thing. So that's the first, is what do the statutes say that we need to do? Second, truly, is stakeholder feedback. I mean, that's been a hallmark of everything I've done, is always the interaction with stakeholders, and really knowing, partially because I came from agriculture and partially because I stay in touch with people in agriculture, is what does this mean on the ground? What are you guys experiencing? What are your pain points? That guides what we do. And, to the extent that I have latitude on what our priorities are, those two things are probably the biggest things. And, so we get, I think you're going to ask probably about our reorganization and stuff, but that kind of feeds into this
go for
question, I think, is, we had a lot of silos. I mean, every place has silos. You always want to break them down, right? But over time, either some of our divisions have been combined because somebody left and there was a good manager over here, so let's put those together, or we brought in an outside agency to be part of Department of Ag. And so we kind of had these different silos. And when you come in as a new person and you look at it and think, well, why isn't all the plant stuff together, and and all the pesticide stuff together, and why aren't we've got inspectors in all these different divisions, but yet they're using completely different systems about tracking their scheduling and their all that. And so I waited about a year, and I didn't come in and say, we're going to make all these big changes, I'm going to blow up the thing, but I took about a year to do ride-alongs, get to know my leadership, and understand who does what, and basically beginning this year we implemented a new organizational structure. Really was a leadership restructure, and really pleased with how that's come out. My team is just wonderful. I've got two deputy directors that are great. One was the strategic planner, Heather Flowers. And she's now deputy director for strategy and operations.
Cool.
And then brought in Sheldon Jones, who a lot of people know because he sat in this chair as director 20 plus years ago, which was a very unconventional choice, but it's been wonderful. Number one, he knows the industry. He's from the industry like I am. He grew up in a ranching family in Payson. Number two, he knows the agency. It may look different than it did 20 plus years ago, but basically he knows the agency and the statutes and how it works. And then he knows what I need to know, right? Because what I learned when I came in, I'm a pretty hands-on person, and there's just too much going on here for me to be involved at any, detailed level. And I think maybe I had 11 direct reports when I first came in.
Oh, my goodness.
I remember even before I came in, I had a Zoom meeting with the leadership team, which I was expecting to be, I don't know, half dozen people, and there was like 25 people around the table. So we've with this reorg now, as far as my direct reports, it's just 4.
Oh, perfect.
I have my 2 deputies. I have a executive assistant and the person who's a combined legislative liaison and public information officer.
Oh, perfect.
So it number one gives a lot more ability for the people that are directly supervising the team to do that.
Right.
To have one-on-one meetings and be more engaged. And then number two, it gives me a little more time for my other roles of serving on the governor's cabinet, working with other agencies, and then working with stakeholders and the NASDA group that I mentioned, and the interaction with the federal agencies and things like that. I just got off the phone. The reason I was a few minutes late here is talking with USDA about some of the ports of entry and how do we expedite commerce through those. So,
oh, cool. What an interesting phone call. I can only imagine.
I have lots of those, and again, that's super important. I think that's super important. I think it's super important that I weigh in on the governor's cabinet, on the policies that they're implementing or different state agencies are doing. But it's really hard to do all that and give adequate attention to the different divisions. And so I'm so pleased to have that leadership in place. And I can get into that structure. I'd like to, but I think for your previous question, I was thinking just as an example, having what we called environmental services, which was the pesticide area of agriculture. And we also had the pest management division, which is pesticides for home and businesses, right? Yeah. And they were completely separate. Now they're together, which makes total sense.
It totally makes sense.
The same kind of products, so the same kind of safety, same kind of worker safety, same kind of licensing of applicators.
They may just have different audiences that they're taking care of.
Yeah. And what's one of the advantages? I mean, those advantages are obvious, but one that I hadn't thought of, the pest professional organization, which is the association for the pest management division, the home, the termites and the bug sprayers and the weed control, they depend on a lot of the same chemicals that we depend on the farm, right? And and they're too small of a user for companies to make these products be registered for that use necessarily, or for that, just for these products. So they very much advocate for some of these crop protection products to stay on the market, stay available for agriculture.
Oh, wow.
Because then they can use them in their business. So we get that synergy.
I was going to say, so it built up, there's more strength when those two different groups that are really aligned and related are both advocating for the same thing. Yeah. That's cool.
And silos keep that from happening, right?
I know. Yeah. Well, at Arizona Farm Bureau, and if you were still there, you'd be reading it too.
I'm going to mention another silo just so I don't forget it, because it's a great story. Our non-regulatory, the Agriculture and Food System Support Division, administers a lot of grant programs. One of them is wonderful. The legislature, former Representative David Cook, I think, was the driver on it, got $10 million allocated to the Department of Agriculture for what's called the Livestock Operators Fire and Flood Assistance Program.
Right.
And what it was
we report that so people can apply for it.
Good, yeah, and I appreciate that. But here's what was happening. We got $10 million to do that, and we got through the first year, and I think we'd given out one grant for $60,000.
Oh, wow.
Now, it's not for lack of need, right? We know that lots of ranches have had wildfires that destroyed infrastructure, and then, of course, what happens 2 weeks after a wildfire, monsoon season kicks in, and all of a sudden you got flooding, and that damages the infrastructure. So so I think it's awesome. We've got this program. We can give out this money to let them rebuild and get back in business. I was at a gathering of our livestock inspectors, and I asked how many of them were familiar with the grant program, and not a single hand went up.
Really?
And so that was a silo that needed to be broken down, so that now when our livestock inspector's out on a ranch and sees that they've had wildfire or flooding damage, they can say, hey, you need to go to our, you need to go take advantage of this program.
Or the other point is, I'm not doing the job I need to be doing as strategic communicator, getting that information out. Or, oh my gosh.
Well, no, it couldn't have been your fault. There was also actually a change needed in the statute. As simple as changing the word and to or.
Really?
Yes. Some of the minutiae that you need to get into. But we were able to make that change. And that's, again, when you talk about policy, when I realized that we were not able to give out this funding, I dug into why.
Okay.
And the why was that it actually, the way it was written, was requiring to tie those two together. It had to be wildfire and flooding as a result of that, and you couldn't give for one or the other. And so changing the word and to or opened it up. Let them know
that it opened up. And plus, not everybody is an Arizona Farm Bureau member. So if you're not an Arizona Farm Bureau member, you're not going to get access to our amazing communications. You need to sign up. The fact of the matter is, not every farmer and rancher in the state of Arizona is a member.
Amazing.
I'm shocked. Well, since we talked about that and a little bit about the reorg, the segue question to that is like, how do the divisions, I get a vibe that the divisions are already collaborating more, and there are times when they have to. And who was it that, I think it was Robert Zmook told me, did I get his name right, that it was all hands on deck and you have, I think, mentioned it before, but all hands on deck when the bird flu impacted one of the, backyard farms, so to speak. Mm. And so there's a lot of collaboration when sometimes it's all hands on deck and everybody. I don't know if it was cross-departmental, but people that would normally not have to go out there and depopulate.
Yeah. No, we have people all across the state, right, for livestock inspectors, for our weights and measures division, for the pest management division. We've got these different regulatory programs that have inspectors across the state. And so they can be the eyes and ears for each other if they see some problem or some opportunity like the grants. That's one way. And something as simple as the administrative support, right? That part of this reorg is not sexy and not something we really talk about, but we also have sort of single points of contact for administrative support so that they'll act more as a team on supporting those divisions and having more standardization for how things are done. What are the processes? What are the documentation? These kinds of things. So eventually it boils down to some things like when I first came in, we were working on the state, on our budget request from the state. And that is a process and a half that I've learned. But you got to have, money's not just flowing. In fact, we've been in a deficit situation. So you have to have really good justification for any funding that you need. And to me, the first thing is to look at, are there statutory requirements that we're not meeting?
Sure.
But then the second is to quantify, what are we not accomplishing that we should be, and what's the value or the danger of doing that or not doing that? And so some of these systems to collect that data of how quickly do we respond when we get a call, how many cases are closed within X number of days, and how much compliance is improved, and all these things. So it becomes really important.
That has got to be powerful if somebody says, oh, sorry, budget limitations, you're just not going to get that. And you point to, it's in the statute, the requirement is we have to be there, boots on the ground in 48 hours if you don't give me the inspection. Whatever it is. Number
one argument. Yeah, wow. Absolutely.
And people forget that. We love to pass a law to make something better. And then inertia, time passes, It's like we're not even complying with the statute. Okay, if you haven't complied with the statute, maybe the statute needs to be revised or go away.
Yeah, and then there's things where I'll call them the emergent issues. You mentioned bird flu, and when there's that kind of outbreak, or heaven forbid a nuclear release at Palo Verde. I mean, so that's a part that we don't see very often. I mean, we as the public, but who's relied on to respond to those things?
Right.
Government.
Yeah.
And so what if we had the bird flu outbreak in a huge egg facility, and then at the same time, 5 dairies are infected and some backyard things, and you've got, we don't have a whole lot of veterinarians. We've got some in the state veterinarian's office, but it can get spread thin real quick. And
sure.
So one of the things that's out there when we talked about silos and kind of crossing the whole organization is our emergency planning resources, and that,
everybody has to come together.
Yeah, and we have some who that's what they do. They very professionally, they are emergency planners and emergency responders, and they do their best to have us as an agency prepared for when there's an emergency. And that's actually one of my roles, one of my many roles that I wasn't even aware of, is I'm on the state emergency operations committee or whatever, council, I guess. We have quarterly tabletop exercises at the State Emergency Operations Center. There's about 12 or 14 key areas of that emergency response, and we're one for natural resources. So I sit at the policy table with the governor when there's an emergency to be responded to, because people don't think about it, but say there were a nuclear accident and they close off an area, no entry. Well, what about all the animals in there? Or say there's a disruption in the water supply. Again, how do you get water to the animals? There's agri-terrorism, all sorts of different things that you don't like to think about. But again, we look to government when it happens. And it's a really hard balance of how do we have the resources to be ready to respond, even though you don't need them every day. And so we don't have a problem with excess resources. So, for example, state or veterinarians that we have so many duties as far as responding to disease or animal welfare calls, but then they play sort of double duty with the livestock inspections and the ownership, and but we need those resources when we have to respond.
And I was going to say, we don't think about it until the emergency comes. We, the people, maybe I need to put that at the top of my prayer list. That's kind of intimidating. Even going to the quarterly meetings, and you kind of do a mock scenario thing is basically what you guys do.
We do.
It's
sobering.
Intimidating.
It's sobering. Like I say, we've done several about a nuclear emergency, but also if there's riots on election day or things.
Or another pandemic.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Covering for everybody. So it's not quite my list, but so because of kind of this reorg, have you had a sense of more seamlessness amongst the departments?
So I can't explain the difference. I'm so thrilled when I get the leadership team around this table. The way that we're working together, the positive movement forward.
Awesome.
I'm very pleased. And we were able to do it. Sheldon mentions this quite often because he's been through different reorgs. We were able to do it. Mostly people got more opportunities. People like Teresa who got more responsibility, more opportunities.
And again, she is so enthusiastic.
And there are some people retiring that have had a long career here, and so we're able to put the puzzle pieces together. And there's always angst when there's some kind of reorg, but it wasn't something we were trying to show people the door and cut people. We were just trying to really make it an effective organization. And so it's been exciting to see people like Teresa that step up, actually absolutely step up, and they have that experience and they're ready to go. And
it's neat. So what about stakeholder engagement? The fact of the matter, again, going back to that whole the food supply chain, and every stakeholder in every link in the food supply chain matters. So how do you conduct that? I think a lot of people forget that the Arizona Department of Ag, you're leaning on a lot of committees, ag committees is what I call them, right? Or
yeah, advisory councils.
Advisory councils. So how does that work, and why is it important?
Yeah, so we do have a number of advisory councils. We have one for the whole department that guides me basically. So we have that's the Arizona Department of Agriculture Advisory Council. That's in statute, and it clearly spells out that there's two people from crop agriculture, 2 people from animal agriculture, and then 1 agribusiness person, and they can't be from the same county. And there's all these, so you get statewide representation of different parts of the ag industry, and they give us feedback on any new rules that we're thinking of implementing, or budget requests that we have, and things like that. So so that's definitely one form, and they meet at least quarterly, public meeting. So I really rely on them. And then each division, I shouldn't say each, but divisions and programs, they'll have advisory councils too. And I try to go to those meetings when I can, but that's for those division heads and assistant directors and whatnot to get that industry input also. And I know I mentioned the pest professional organization, and so I know those kind of industry inputs have informed me a lot about some of the areas that I'm not as familiar about, because they're not something I had been interacting with coming from agriculture. But we're always finding those ways to.
It almost sounds like you're double layered too. Those advisory committees on the broader sense, and then each division might have. Yeah. Which means that you almost don't get a chance to do anything in a tunnel or opaque.
That's the goal, right?
That is the goal.
We talk about silos, and silos are never good.
And then, of course, the advisory councils, the members of that have to be committed to really be participating.
They do, and it's quite a process. I mean, they have to be nominated, and then they have to be interviewed by the governor's office, and then ultimately, anyways, it's a process to get on, and it's important to me, that number one, that they will be engaged and give their input, and number two, that it is that broad representation, so we're really getting what we need to know. And that's what I often tell people when when they tell me I'm doing a good job or whatever. It's like, well, just tell me what I need to know, because I try hard to respond when there's an issue. But
you're looking for advisory members that will be transparent and will be honest with you. Yeah. And boy, on the farm and ranch community, I can tell you,
hard to find.
It's not hard to find. So I'm getting to one of the tough ones. Given the budget constraints and staffing challenges you've noted in the past, and certainly other directors before you, how does the Arizona Department of Ag still manage to implement good policies or good rules, let's say, that benefit the state, and what opportunities do you see for growth?
Well, the biggest answer to that is our employees.
Yeah.
I mean, our employees are out there no matter what the workload, working overtime, driving across the state to do their thing. We have amazing employees, and and we have the spectrum from, we have a lot that are here 20, 25, 30 plus years. And then we have a lot of fresh new stars too. And so I'm really excited by that. And each time that we have a position to fill, it's pretty rare that we don't have somebody raring to go to fill that to move up to that next spot. But so having great employees out there, even when we are understaffed and have a lot to do, they just get it done. And it's that's my job, is try to get the resources out there to let them get the job done, and then to prioritize what is it. We can't do everything. Right. What is it we need to get done? And that comes, back to your previous question about engagement. We have coming up later this month a statewide stakeholder feedback meeting. I try to do those at least once a year, and that's actually timed with, we have an annual process to do a strategic plan. And so we're in that process of formulating the strategic plan for the next fiscal year that starts July 1st. And so we very strategically timed this meeting. So we ask all the associations, all the, different types of industries. I just met the Arizona wine growers president yesterday. So we try to engage uh, everybody as far as stakeholders that we can think of to come to that meeting and let us know, what are we doing well, what are we not doing, what opportunities are there for us to do something that helps with compliance, helps with opportunity, helps with promotion. Um, and then we come out of that meeting with a pretty good list of priorities, more than we can probably get done, and then we have to prioritize those. But those get incorporated into our strategic plan, and then that gives us the focus for what we work on for the coming year. And we take those out to sort of regional meetings, because the state one is going to be pretty broad, right? Cover all sorts of things. But if we go to Yuma, we're probably going to talk about fresh produce and food safety. And if we go to Prescott, we're probably going to talk about ranching and trichomoniasis and those kind of things. And so that's nice to be able to get a little more specific and talk about what can we do to improve in those areas. So yeah, it is challenging. Honestly, when I came in, there had been a $2 billion state budget surplus, and one of my charges coming in was to do the governor's office understood that this agency has been cut over the years, and so they challenged me to come in and do a staffing needs assessment and turn that into a budget request. So I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to get to come in and be the guy that builds the agency back up. Well, in the time between that and actually turning in the budget, it turned into a 1.2, 1.8, I can't remember, budget deficit. And so we actually had to cut rather than grow. And that was really hard. Really tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's opportunities. I know one that I am excited about is our non-regulated side, that agriculture and food system support division. That's the training, the non-regulatory training. That's the grant programs. That's reactivating the Arizona Grown program.
Right.
Pulling our Food and Agriculture Policy Advisory Council back together, which met earlier this week, to work on food summits and ways that we can help local food systems, and not just limited to that, and that's why that name was carefully of that division was carefully thought out. We couldn't come up with a good acronym, but Agriculture and Food System Support Division. If you think about it, that's really broad. That's any way we can help with water conservation. How do you stay productive and use less water? If we're going to expect farmers to do that, we being society writ large, we need to give them resources to do that. And I push that in every meeting I'm in about water is, okay, if we're going to put some guidelines and some regulations on the amount of water you can use, they're carrying the brunt for what society wants. So give them the resources to do that.
And the young woman that you've got in that spot, she's amazing. Her background.
Yeah, Ashley Grab is running that division, and she comes from the food systems, both from the grocery stores, from county nutrition. Yeah, she's very plugged in.
Another person very passionate about what she's doing.
Yeah, really glad to have her on board. Yeah. And like I say, I'm really, really happy and really proud when I see my team around the table, and I know all the great things they're doing, as you saw in your series. So thanks again for spotlighting them.
So this is kind of related to, it's collaboration, it's stakeholders in the supply chain, but it's more like those partnership elements, like with the USDA and the University of Arizona. How do these collaborations maybe shape policy, or even at least influence the way you're operating as a team and lead to positive outcomes for Arizona agriculture?
And I got to say that there are other universities in the state.
I know.
And they offer a lot of good things.
Arizona State University, my alma mater.
Which, by the way, has a lot of good programs around agribusiness and sustainable food systems, and we interact with them very closely. And I appreciate the work that they do. We've had interns from them.
Thank you for giving them props.
No, I need to. They've been very active with us, and that's one of our collaborations. Certainly U of A being the land grant university means they're on the ground and have a lot of interaction. But ASU is no slouch. And then NAU, of course, with forestry and other things. So I could talk all day about the collaborations. We couldn't get done what we do without collaborations. But in particular, you mentioned the universities and USDA. And boy, I guess I'll start with USDA. I've already alluded to that some with my work on food safety. But if anybody's ever looked at USDA and their org chart, it's incredible.
It is crazy.
I mean, the stuff they do on food safety, animal health, rural development, trade, you can go down the list, and they have grant programs, they have personnel, they have cooperative agreements. And so the term I hear a lot, especially when I go to NASDA, is co-regulators. So there's a lot of things that we do that really are something that USDA is required to, or it's in their purview. So, for example, meat processing plants, where animals are harvested, you have to have an inspector there. Actually, at the harvesting facilities, all the hours that they're open has to have an inspector there.
Yeah. And most people don't know that.
No, and it can become a limit to commerce, right? Mm-hmm. When COVID hit, there was suddenly all this demand for locally produced food, and the ranchers wanted to provide their local beef. But if there wasn't a slaughter and packing house nearby, or one that couldn't operate because it couldn't get an inspector to be there, then that was a problem. So ultimately that responsibility lies with USDA, but through cooperative agreements, which often or do come with funding, then we can do those inspections. We have to be at a equal, what's the word I'm looking for? But we have to be able to be the same as a USDA inspector and be certified for that, so that then we can do the inspections. Now, the number that I've heard, which is a little hard to believe, is that when we do those inspections instead of the federal agency, it's 20 cents on the dollar. So it's actually saving a lot in the federal budget to have the states do the inspections. But even more important than the money savings is our farmers and ranchers would much prefer an Arizona Department of Agriculture person to come on than a federal officer. So so we do as much of that as we can, and that's the food inspections, the egg, dairy, poultry, meat inspections that I talked about. At the border, the quality and safety of food products coming across the border, you name it. We have these cooperative agreements, and we do this co-regulatory status, and there's a lot of turmoil in that right now. Yeah. A lot of federal personnel that are taking retirements or being told to leave because they're probationary or whatever it is. Personnel are gone, and then programs are disappearing and funding's disappearing. So it's a little scary time. I saw something the other day that under the umbrella of foreign aid going away, foreign monitoring and programs on bird flu and the New World screwworm, which I don't know if everybody's heard of that, but New World screwworm.
It did come up in one of our interviews. It sounds like a very scary.
It's horrible, and it used to be here, and it got pushed out of the United States down through Central America to below Panama, and there's programs with sterile flies and whatnot that keep it down there. Well, recently it was found in Mexico, and USDA had to close the border to the hundreds of thousands of cattle that crossed the border. And now it's opened up on a limited extent, but we're very concerned about that coming in here. So when I read that under this umbrella of foreign aid being stopped, that these two programs are being stopped, it
makes you a little bit nervous.
It was kind of a gut punch, yeah.
If the funding is there, then there may be more of an opportunity for, as long as the training is equal or the status of those inspections is treated, as long as the funding is there, maybe there would be more times for Arizona-based people through the Arizona Department of Ag to be those inspectors.
Yeah. So it's
as long as the funding is there.
That's the problem right now. Yeah, we found HLB, the citrus greening disease.
Oh yeah.
We found the vector for years, the Asian citrus psyllid, but now we've actually found the disease. Luckily, it's in Nogales, which is not a citrus production area.
Yeah.
But you respond to something like that. USDA found it, actually. I shouldn't say we. USDA was doing the trapping and testing and found that disease. Normally, they have personnel who come in and take those trees out and deal with it in conjunction with us. But the two personnel who would have normally done that are no longer with USDA. So now we're going to respond because it has to be responded to.
Right.
We're going to find a way to do that. And yeah, the question is, where do you get funding for that? So,
right.
So yeah, it's a tumultuous time, and it kind of goes back to the emergency planning part that if you think about it, all these things where we're trying to prevent pests or diseases of animals or plants or whatever it is, you don't think about it till there's a problem, and so yeah, it takes resources.
It does take resources, and we sometimes forget that. So,
but there's so much. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I didn't get into the university part, but the federal agencies, and it's USDA, but it's also FDA and EPA.
Yeah, you're right.
All three of those are really important that we cooperate with. But the universities are a key one too, and that's my background. Was part of it was at the university, so I've got those great ties in with cooperative extension, with the research arm, and just yesterday I was on with some researchers talking about. A lot of people know that I helped set up a wastewater testing lab down in Yuma in response to the pandemic. I was actually talking with those researchers about how could that technology be applied to helping industry with the bird flu, to know that it's there and when they need to be more careful and things like that. There's potential there, and
cool.
Of course that takes funding too. But luckily, this is a focus of USDA and the new administration, and hats off to them. Is we got to do something about bird flu,
right? And
so there's money being put out there for research in I think 4 different areas. And,
excellent!
So if we could bring that to bear and have that help our industry to avoid these kind of problems, that'd be wonderful. So I look to the university for a lot, whether it's getting the word out about trichomoniasis and best practices, research on water conservation, whatever it is. They're great partners. And like I said, ASU with their sustainable food systems and their next gen, I think they call it. So we've had some great interns, and so lots of potential for collaboration.
And an exciting future if we remember that we can take we can partner and take advantage of these partners.
Yeah.
So I've got one more question, and it's basically about success. How do you measure it? And some of it's kind of obvious. You've alluded to it a little bit, but how are you, as the director for the Arizona Department of Agriculture, Paul Brierley, measuring success?
That's a squishy one. Measures. I mean, one thing is on the internal side, we have the state does an annual survey of employees called the Employee Engagement Survey, and one of our strategic plan objectives is to increase the positive part of that by 10%. Get that many more of our employees feeling that they're equipped, motivated, rewarded, recognized, and all that.
Cool. I love that.
We've been taking suggestions. We're implementing a couple that have come up through those things. Tuition reimbursement. We're implementing a program about that. Helping with the uniform allowances. There's been some issues there. So just trying to meet the needs there and have, because our as we spoke about, our employees have a heavy load. They have a lot that they need to do. So trying to increase that that response from the employees to see that we're doing a good job there. And then you can also just look at what our retention is. It was pretty high. A few years ago, we had like 30% loss of employees. And that's really tough because a lot of our employees, almost all of them, require a lot of training and experience to really be able to be out there and be effective. And so you can't just hire someone off the street and say, here, go,
and fix it.
Yeah, go inspect a meat packing plant. I mean, it doesn't work that way. It takes a year or two. So, but then you can look at, there are measurable things, again, I mentioned before, response times, compliance percentages, things like that. But I guess what I really care more about is what's the feedback that I'm getting. Is industry happy with it? It does my heart so much good when people come and say, hey, we've been working with, employee X and they just did a great job for us. And we used to have struggles with getting a license or getting an inspection done, but now it's happening. And that's, to me, the one that really counts.
That is. It's kind of like that customer care or customer surveys. And you'll remember this when you were at Arizona Farm Bureau, but when I first started there, I used to do a readership survey of our membership on our 2 publications annually. Now I do it about every 3 years. because it just wasn't practical, and a lot of times they were coming up with a lot of the same answers. But one of the favorite parts of those surveys was, as a general rule, what do you think? And just the commentaries would give me insights, including suggesting other things that we should be covering for the content. And I know that's so simple compared to what you guys do here.
But it's, no, it brings home a really good point, is it you learn things out of that you didn't expect. And so I really try hard when organizations invite me to speak at their annual meeting or whatever it is, or come tour a farm, or I try so hard to say yes, even though my calendar is really full. And part of the reason is I always learn something. Mm-hmm. I know a lot, but I always learn something, and it's really important to learn those things.
And a lot of times when you're face to face with ultimately what are your customers, your key stakeholders, they're going to let you know what they need, what their pain points are, or compliment you for doing something right. You know?
I never mind a compliment, but what's really valuable to me is, oh, I didn't realize you had to do that. I didn't realize why. Just one thing that's popping up in my mind is farmers that have a lease on state trust land,
right? And
the need for a long-term lease because of the cropping patterns and the investments they put in.
You're right.
You need to know those things when I'm sitting on the cabinet and talking with other agencies. Then here's why this is important.
Well, I have to say something about you, Paul. It's felt like you've been out and about. I'm out and about a lot with my farmers, thanks to Talk to a Farmer Friday. And we keep running into each other. And then a lot of them are some of those meetings. But I really appreciate this, and thank you for letting me crawl in the hallways of the Arizona Department of Ag to certainly learn about your department, even learn about the reorganization and see what we do. I have a greater sense of what the Arizona Department of Ag does, and I really appreciate you opening your doors for us.
You are welcome. I'm glad your 1,000 people that are looking at it too are gaining that.
Yes, they're getting it. And so we're probably on sabbatical next Friday, but then we're going to start a new series for those of you that are regularly viewing these Talk to a Farmer Fridays, and we're going to talk a lot about one of our favorite crops. Of course, they're all favorite to me, but Arizona agriculture's wine industry and the wine grape growers, and also our wine makers. So stay tuned. It's going to be a lot to talk about, and it's going to be very exciting. And Paul Brierley, Director of the Arizona Department of Ag, thanks again for hanging out with us.
You're welcome. My pleasure.